From the towering Wasatch Mountains of the American Southwest, we welcome you to this episode of Undiscovered Utah. This show focuses on the mysteries that surround the rugged, difficult, and sometimes deadly American Southwest. I'm your host, JB, and tonight I'm going to tell you about 3 old mining camp ghost towns near the Wasatch Front, and the story of the dead soldier's gold that's waiting to be rediscovered. Let me tell you something. One of the most famous mining camps in all of Utah was Murcer. In the early 1860s, the first mining claim in the area was the Sparrowhawk Mine. Within a few months, the small mining town was up and running. In 1870, gold was discovered at the head of Lewiston Canyon near present-day Cedar Fort. By 1873, there were over 2,000 people living in the mining camp that was first given the name of Lewiston. The future of Lewiston was in jeopardy as the placer gold that was discovered proved to be very shallow. The miners did see evidence of gold, silver, and mercury embedded in quartz veins. They called these veins Murcer. However, the milling process at the time could not process the quartz. So for about the next 20 years, they worked on inventing a way to mill the quartz. During this time, the town of Lewiston became a ghost town. Finally, in 1890, they invented a way to use cyanide in the milling process. This became known as the MacArthur Forest process. This process allowed not only the gold to be extracted, but also silver. This was the first successful cyanide operation in the entire United States. Now that there was a way to mill the Murcer ore, another little gold rush started, and the town started to come back to life, but this time under the new name of, you guessed it, Murcer. Murcer grew until over 6,000 residents called it home. It had all kinds of businesses up and down its streets, and when I say all kinds, I mean all kinds. It is said that there were more murders in Murcer than preachers. Speaking of preachers, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints established a small branch in Murcer in 1896 for the church members working in the mines and in the town. In 1899, 3 men by the name of Moses W. Reynolds, James Duckworth, and Sidney S. Reynolds were sent to Murcer as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Their success in the rough and wild mining town led to the branch being turned into a ward in May of 1900, just 1 year later. Then in 1896, fires started in the town and quickly spread to other buildings. There was no way to stop it, and within hours, the entire town of Murcer burnt to the ground. This was obviously absolutely devastating to the miners, business owners, and families that called Murcer home. The mines were still rich in ore, and so the town of Murcer started to rebuild, and rebuild quickly. Soon a new rail line was built from Camp Floyd to Murcer. It was called the Salt Lake and Murcer Railroad. Soon the town had grown to be bigger and better than before the fire, and the population rose to over 12,000. The mines were rolling in money. For example, the Golden Gate mine produced, get this, $20 million alone. Then in 1902, another fire broke out, this time in the Preble Hotel, and quickly spread throughout the town. Once again, the entire town was a raging inferno. Then heavy rains came, and you think that would be a blessing, right? Wrong. This caused massive flash floods, and the floods wiped out what was little left of the town after the fire. The mine shafts were even flooded and collapsed. This was the final nail in the coffin for the town of Murcer. The area was quickly abandoned and left to the ghosts. Mining operations have come and gone over the years in the area of Murcer, and in 1980 and 1990, the Barrick Murcer Gold Mine Foundation purchased many of the claims in the Murcer area and opened an open-pit mining operation. It was reported that they produced about $20 million a year up until 1997. The next town we want to talk about tonight is the town and canyon of Ophir, Utah. Ophir was named after the biblical Ophir. In the Old Testament, in the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles, it says that Hiram, or Huram, depending on which story you are reading, sent his servants with the servants of King Solomon by ship to Ophir, and they brought back with them 450 talents of gold. They also brought back silver, precious stones such as onyx and sapphires, and algum trees. Does anybody know how much gold is in a talent? It is estimated that 1 talent was the weight of an average person at the time, so we estimate around 130 pounds. So 130 pounds is equal to 1 talent. I guess people back then weren't quite as chubba wubba as I am. Anyway, 450 talents of gold would be the equivalent to 58,500 pounds of gold. Not troy ounces, but pounds. As I tell you this story, gold is $1,848.47 per troy ounce. There are about 14.6 troy ounces in a pound. So 1 pound of gold is worth about $26,956.79. The amount of gold that the servants of Hiram and King Solomon brought back on their ships would be valued today at a whopping $1,576,972,364.23. Wouldn't even scratch our current national debt, but it did do a very nice job in adorning King Solomon's temple. So any guesses why the town and canyon of Ophir, Utah were called Ophir? Oh, you guys are smart. That's correct. It is because of all the algum trees. Wait, what? No, it's because of all the gold and silver. You see, Ophir was in just the next canyon over from Murcer. The first mining claims in the Ophir Canyon area were founded in the late 1860s, and in just a few weeks, the town of Ophir popped into existence. It is said that the Kearsarge mine made over $1 million in pure silver, and it was mined in just a few weeks. By 1900s, over $13 million had been mined out of that one mine. But that wasn't the only mine in the area. Matter of fact, by 1871, over 2,500 mining claims had been staked in Ophir Canyon alone. The town of Ophir was growing, and in the same year had reached a population of about 1,200 people. The mines had rich ore, and many boasted 20,000 ounces of silver per ton. But just like Murcer, the deposits were shallow and quickly played out. But unlike Murcer, the town of Ophir was never officially declared a ghost town, even to this day. Granted, it is one of the smaller towns in Utah, with a population of about 50 people according to the 2020 census. But I love to visit Ophir. It is a fun little town to explore, but please be respectful of the people that still call this beautiful little canyon home. Our last little ghost town for this week's episode is the town of Manning. Manning was built to support Murcer, but it was built on the opposite side of the mountain in Utah County. Remember when I told you how Murcer started using cyanide in the gold milling process? The man that mainly promoted the use of this process was L.S. Manning. Manning Canyon was named after him, and so was the little town of Manning. The cyanide process required a lot of water, and Murcer Canyon had none. But Manning Canyon, on the other hand, had plenty of water. So the mill to process the gold was built in Manning Canyon, and a small town was created to support the mill. Oh, sure, Manning had all the comforts of a typical mining town. Saloons, and even a few saloons. The mill was operating 24 hours a day and working with cyanide all day. Moods could get a little explosive, if you know what I mean. So the saloons in town did very well. Because the demand for the mill was so high, a rail line needed to be built between Manning and Murcer. But the canyon was very, very steep. It was only 6 miles from Manning to Murcer, but because the canyon was so steep, they had to lay 12 miles of track. It was a very dangerous and treacherous rail line. They said you could often see the train's engine and the caboose side by side, as there wasn't one section of straight track the entire route. When Murcer burnt for the second time in 1906 and the town of Murcer died, Manning wasn't far behind. The mill of Manning was 100% dependent on the mining at Murcer. The incredibly difficult rail line that was laid between Manning and Murcer was soon hauled off for scrap. Not long after that, the building started to collapse under the heavy weight of winter snows. Today, you might still find an old foundation here and there, or maybe the tailings pond of the mill's cyanide process, but I wouldn't go swimming there if I were you. But it might still be worth your time to visit Old Manning, and let me tell you why. Somewhere near the old ghost town of Manning, Utah, is a lost gold deposit just waiting to be rediscovered. The story goes like this. In 1862, many of the troops at Fort Douglas would spend their R&R time prospecting in the Ophir Mountains on the west side of Salt Lake and Utah counties. The Ophir Mountains are very mineral rich and are the homes of Murcer, Ophir, and Manning, as well as the current-day Rio Tinto Kennecott copper mine, the largest open-pit copper mine in the entire world. One day in the fall of 1862, a soldier by the name of Private James W. Baldwin, Company A, 2nd Cavalry, was under the command of Colonel Patrick E. Connor. He was prospecting up what would become called Manning Canyon. He climbed up further on the steep canyon walls than his fellow soldiers cared to traverse. While alone in the high Ophir Mountain range, something caught Private Baldwin's eye. It was a ledge of beautiful rose quartz. Upon closer examination, the private took out his pocket knife and chipped off a few pieces of the rose quartz to reveal a thin thread of wire gold embedded in the quartz. He couldn't believe his eyes. His pocket knife got quite a workout that day, chipping at the rose-colored quartz and finding more and more wire gold. Private Baldwin took as much as the gold as he could possibly carve out of the rock with his little pocket knife. But before he left, he found the biggest tree near the ledge that he could find and that would be easy to locate when he had time to come back. And he carved a huge letter B into the bark. Then he headed back to Fort Douglas before he was considered AWOL. It didn't take long for word to spread to his commander, Colonel Connor, about Private Baldwin's discovery. Colonel Connor ordered Baldwin to his quarters, and upon inspecting the gold, said it was richer than any gold he had seen while in California. Needless to say, Private James W. Baldwin was elated and planned to return as quickly as possible to what his fellow soldiers were now calling Baldwin's Ledge. But before he could return during his next leave of absence, his company, under the direction of Colonel Connor, was deployed in January of 1863 on a forced march to the northern edge of the Cache Valley, to the banks of the Bear River just north of the town of Preston in the Utah Territory. Today, this is present-day Preston, Idaho. Here are the words of Colonel Connor concerning this deployment, and I quote, "I have the honor to report that from information received from various sources of the encampment of a large body of Indians on the Bear River in Utah Territory, 140 miles north of this point, who had settlements in this valley to the Beaverhead mines east of the Rocky Mountains, and had satisfied that they were part of the same band who had been murdering immigrants on the overland mail route for the last 15 years, and the principal actors and leaders in the horrid massacres of the past summers. I determined, although the season was unfavorable for an expedition in consequence of the cold weather and deep snows, to chasten them if possible." End quote. Colonel Connor's cavalry found the tribe of Bannock Indians had settled a winter's camp in the fertile valley on the banks of the Bear River as they had done for generations. In a future episode, we will dedicate an entire episode on what led up to the deployment of Colonel Connor's troops and what happened to all parties of what is now referred to as the Bear River Massacre. But for this episode, suffice it to say that Private James W. Baldwin never returned from the Battle of the Bear River. You see, he was killed during the battle. He never had the opportunity to fulfill his dream of returning to Manning Canyon and once again seeing that beautiful rose quartz ledge and the thin wire gold that ran through its veins. The surviving soldiers, upon returning from the battle, went in search of Baldwin's Ledge and the big pine tree with the letter B carved into the bark. But there was no reward to be found for the surviving soldiers of one of the worst massacres on the native indigenous people of North America. So, it is possible that still today, somewhere high up Manning Canyon, is a huge old pine tree with a big letter B carved into the bark, and somewhere nearby a ledge of rose quartz still hiding plenty of pure wire gold. Personally, I hope a descendant of the Shoshone-Bannock tribe will be the one to find this undiscovered Utah treasure. If you would like more information about tonight's episode, you can email us at info@undiscoveredutah.com. You can visit us on the internet at undiscoveredutah.com or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And be sure to follow us. Just search for Undiscovered Utah. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Utah. Join me next time as I share more about the Great Southwest. Good night, everyone.